Grace and peace to you. I'm in my office again this morning, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the art on my wall and why I've selected it. And today I wanted to talk about this picture, which is of a mosaic that's at a church in the Holy Land. The church is Dominus Flevit, which is Latin for the Lord wept. And the church is on the Mount of Olives near Jerusalem, and it's there to remember the time when Jesus weeps over the city of Jerusalem. And I'm reading from Matthew's Gospel. Jesus says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing." And so we see in this beautiful mosaic Jesus as the hen gathering her chicks under her arms, which is what chickens do, right, for protection from foes. And Jesus in this story talks of the same impulse, of this motherly protective impulse to protect the people. And one of the reasons why I love this picture so much is because it lifts up the way that Jesus describes himself using feminine imagery. And I think one of the major issues we have in the church today is thinking of God in exclusively masculine ways. And I think predominantly in 2019, people think of God as a man, as maybe a great Santa Claus-looking man sitting in the clouds. And God isn't a man. We know that God is bigger than humanity, and God is not bound by human concepts of gender. And I think it's very problematic to assign just one way of being to God and say God is a man when God doesn't have an anatomy. God is bigger than male or female, and God doesn't exist in our understanding of how gender works. And so saying that God is a man, either directly or subconsciously, is problematic, because it means that maleness is elevated, and it also means that femaleness is downgraded. And I think that these things have had huge problematic implications on the way that our culture has developed over thousands of years, and still in the way that patriarchy continues to be a problematic corruption of humanity today. And we often think that the Bible just supports these ideas because our Bibles use a lot of he pronouns. And while there certainly is masculine language for God in the Bible, we also need to recognize there's a lot of feminine language for God in the Bible. There's stuff like the story I just said where Jesus explicitly draws on a female, feminine image for himself. There's also plenty of stuff where God talks about wanting to care for God's people like a mother cares, and suckle them at God's breast, and how God has fitted them and carried them in God's womb, or is birthing something new in the world. And all of these are explicitly feminine images, and all of them are just as important as any other images for God that we might get. And so I'm really intentional as much as possible to never use gendered language for God. Instead of saying he is love or anything like that, I'll just say God is love. Or if we're going to use gendered pronouns and say he, then we should equally use she for God, because both he and she are equally accurate or inaccurate. And so I think that holding up images like this hen for God is one way to help and restore a fuller picture of who God is, not just maleness being made in God's image, but all of humanity, male and female and everything else, made in God's image and fully bearing who God is, because God is bigger than our concepts of gender. And so I think lifting that up, trying to avoid boxing God in as male, or even subconsciously referring to God as he, is one way to free ourselves into a deeper theology and a deeper understanding of who God is, and seeing how all of humanity is created in God's image. Remember that you are loved, and God's peace be with you.